Well, I think it was Sharon and I did a little tasting of it, like we know what we're doing, but it was okay, and I don't know if I'd buy it again necessarily, but if some people like that flavor profile, it certainly is. It's behind the counter at most specs, so it's apparently highly regarded, as far as that goes. But yeah, back to the Kentucky bourbon distilleries. You like Michter's. After that, who would you say?
My second favorite, I love them not just because they opened the same year 19 did, but because their whiskey's amazing, and that's Rabbit Hole. Rabbit
Hole, okay, yeah.
They're big boys, and everything they make, like we got a hold, when we were there, I bought one of their, they've only done these special releases, if I got what they call them, four times. Uh-huh. And they had this one bottle, and it was like $400. I go, I'm absolutely taking this home, because you don't get to see these bottles very often. And I go, do you ever heard of the Manzanero Oak? They go, yeah. I go, yeah, I have one of those at my bar. He goes, you got one of those? That's an $800 a pour whiskey.
From Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, they've only done that once. So it's a Japanese oak, and that's what gives Japanese whiskey that distinct flavor profile is that oak that they use.
I got it. I wouldn't even have known that they had that high end of a selection. I've had the High Gold. I've had the Derringer.
We have everything they make at the bar.
So what I was told on my last trip was the oak has to be grown from a particular area to call it bourbon.
No.
And so there's a region where the oak is grown.
It's American white oak, and it has to be charred or toasted to a certain level. Most people do 4s. And then some people might do like an alligator char, which means if you char it so heavy, the oak actually starts to look like alligator skin. And to me, sometimes that's almost like... So your barrel is, on your flavor profiles, on percentage-wise, let's think about, you have your grains, you have your terroir, okay, you have your master distiller, yada yada, you have your barrel. Your barrel is 75 to 80% of your flavor profile. So when some people alligator char their barrels, it's like, what are you trying to hide? What's being mixed in there? Like I see some sketchy tequila people come in, and they want to try me on the Repo and the Añejo first. I go, no, I want the Blanco. And they're like, oh, I go, I want the Blanco first.
Yeah.
Because it's not touched. I'm going to know exactly what your tequila tastes like before you try to skip into it. It's one of the reasons I love El Tesoro. Because if you look at the Reposado that's 6 months and their Añejo that's a year, you can barely tell the color difference. They're so in love with their juice, they don't want all that extra flavor involved. Just hints of it.
Yeah. So don't barrel it for that long.
You don't need to barrel it that long.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, people think that Scotch is better because it's aged longer than American whiskeys. Well, think about it like this. We're getting it's not first fill, we're getting virgin oak. So people misunderstand what first fill means. First fill does not mean the first time it's used. It's the first time it's being refilled with another juice. So they're getting our sloppy seconds. Okay? Yeah. And then how many months of aging do they have over there compared to us?
Yeah.
Texas, you've got 12 months of aging. But when it freezes, that juice is sitting in that barrel going like this. I'm like, oh, well, it just sits there. You're not pulling anything from it.
Yeah.
So we have more months to age in. We have the virgin oak. Yeah. So we don't need to age that long.
Right. And by the time they get it, some of their, we've already pulled some of the good stuff out, let's say.
Yeah. We pulled the original stuff out.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
what they want is some of that oak flavor profile, but they also want the flavors from the whiskey that we were using.
Oh, I was wondering, how do they clean those out exactly? Or
they go to cooperages and they take them apart and they rechar them and or toast them. So.
Yeah, I got it. So on that note, sometimes I was buying that Woodford Reserve double oaked. Now, when they say double oaked, is that like, that's not an age thing? That just means like more charring in the barrel, for instance? Or
using 2 barrels.
2 barrels. Okay. So putting it in one for a period of time, and then right back in another one for a period of time. And
it's kind of like Glenmorangie, who actually started the finishes with Scotch. They have a 12-year. Say their Sauterne, the Nectar d'Or, one of my favorites, like candy. So it's 10 years American oak, 2 years Sauternes.
Wow.
Which is French dessert wine.
Yeah. Interesting. But what I liked about that, I didn't like that bourbon by itself because it was like too oaky for me. But it did brighten up a lot of more boring bourbons. So I would take some, like if I had some Makers or some Evan Williams bottled in bond, I would take a little bit of that Woodford Double Oaked and made it just like perfect.
So you're mixing your whiskeys.
Yeah.
Cool. We're done.
All right.
Well done.
Well, that's what.
That's
the one whiskey thief that I had mentioned. That's what they do. Theirs is all blends. I mean, none of it.
Well,
is,
what are you talking about with Johnny Walker's?
Yeah.
Those are blended scotches, except for the green. That's a blended malt scotch. So when they changed the name, it used to be called, that category is called pure or vatted. So the Japanese still call it that. And you'll see some other guys that do, you ever see vatted or pure malt, means they blend distilleries. So when they switch, so you have 5 categories of scotch. Single malt, that's 100% malted barley, yeast, water from one distillery. Single grains, that's neutral grains from one distillery, like wheat, rye, corn. And then come down, these are blended malts, blended grains, which means these are a blend of distilleries. Johnny Walker Green is just a blend of distilleries. And then these two decide to make a baby and fuck everything up and make blended scotch. Nobody in Scotland drinks that garbage.
Well, when I was there, we had the barrels from 120 to down to 95. So each one of them was, different potencies and different. I guess they mix water.
That's how you bring your proof down. That's why when you get cask strength or barrel strength, whatever they want to call it. Yeah. When they do that to you, it's like they're letting you be the master distiller. You decide how much water you want to add. So I always suggest when we do our tastings, we always have droppers in the middle of the table, but I always tell them, please try it by itself first.
Yeah.
And we do pour ahead of time because you want to wait at least 5 minutes for your whiskey to open up. Somebody the other day told me they're selling these little blender kind of things, like light ones. You put in your whiskey, and it goes, and it's like speeds it up. And somebody asked me, is that a real thing? I go, absolutely. You're aerating your whiskey. It's opening up really quick.
Just like wine.
You don't, same thing. But you don't line up all your whiskeys in a tasting because these other ones will start to bleed out. That's why when you open a bottle up, I got this great bottle from, I go, how long have you had it? Like 3 years? I go, it's dead. Unless you're gassing it. Because once you open that, it's like when you fill up your tank of gas in your car, say it takes $100 to fill your tank up. You're going to get, say, 500 miles out of that. But if you keep putting $5 in, you're going to get less mileage because all that air is eating that gas up. Air is an enemy of alcohol, gas, all that. So it's always best just to fill up. It's always best just to finish that bottle so it doesn't bleed out on you.
So the basic process then is they start with a mash bill, which I guess is their list and portion of the grains they're going to use to conform with the recipe of bourbon, right?
Well, they can do whatever they want as long as it's 51%.
51.
As far as the mash bill.
As far as the mash bill.
Yeah.
And then the variables in there are the rye content, wheat content, and sometimes they do other grains too?
No, your most popular are rye and barley.
So, rye and barley,
yeah, because
okay.
barley has a high starch content, which starts a germination process.
Okay.
So it's germination, fermentation, distillation, maturation.
Okay.
So
okay.
like vodka doesn't go through the last part.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I don't really think it goes much to the first 3 either, but whatever.
Yeah. And so they put it in their still. And I know there's 1, 2, and 3 stage stills. I was
sometimes 2.
Look at them online. Wheels are spinning. But it's my understanding that, because I did this experiment with my little mini barrel that I got as a gift, and I learned the hard way that if you put something in at 100 proof, it's going to come out higher alcohol than if you put it in lower. And I guess the reason for that is, I think I learned this from you, is alcohol molecules are larger and stay in the barrel, whereas water molecules are smaller and can seep through and evaporate out.
Okay.
Is that pretty much
I
right?
believe so. I'm not a chemist, but
Okay.
I understand how spirits are made for the most part.
So if you're going to do a 10-year bourbon, you may put that in at like, what, an 80 proof? To get it to come out at a barrel proof strength of
right.
120 or 130?
And they'll add water to bring down what they want. Like a lot of whiskeys. Like if you see a whiskey at 40%, 80 proof,
yeah,
it's probably nothing.
Okay.
That's house stuff that you see. That's like a $10 bottle on the shelf.
Absolutely.
Also, the barrel is also a third gone by the time they finish.
Depending on how long it is.
So it evaporates as well as condenses.
Yeah.
So you don't have as much product. The longer you age it, the less product you have in the barrel.
That's a function of the water leaving. And
you know what they call that? The angel share. You've heard that, right?
I've heard the term.
Yeah, it's whatever seeping out of the barrel. That's what the angels get.
Nope.
Yeah, and that's why these 50-year-old scotches are so expensive, because you start off up to here, but by the time it comes out, it's down to here.
Yeah.
There's nothing left. And like, I'm not a big fan of 50-year-olds. I mean, I think 18-year-olds are the perfect gauge for single malt scotches. You get too old, it's like you're picking splinters out of your nose and your palate. It's too much oak.
Yeah.
Macallan 25 is an exception to that. I love that one.
Well, that tells me there's a lot of thought that has to go in before you put it in the barrel, because once it's in the barrel, now let's say they're aging one for 10 years. Do they? Is there a period of time they go before they check it again and check it and check it?
Well, okay.
Like taste, I mean, in all respects.
In any whiskey. So any age statement you see on a bottle of whiskey, that's the youngest whiskey in that barrel.
Okay.
Period. Unlike rums. And like I was saying, we did that rum tasting. There are some rums that are really pushing to move that away, get farther away from that and get more strict.
Yeah.
So your Barbados rums,
right.
They said, screw it. Well, the rum company's not going to do it. We're going to do it.
Right.
So Barbados is the strictest of all rums, and you're only allowed to add caramel for color, not for flavor. But Scotch can do that. Nobody knows that. So everybody talks about single malt Scotch, 100% malted barley yeast water. They can add caramel for coloring, but you don't see that typically, but it's usually in a 12-year-old. Yeah. And the reason that is because they're doubled up on the shelf and they need continuity of color.
Okay.
So some may do that. Yeah, it's a little unknown little.
So that's more of a post or mid-production thing to do. Like they're not doing it in the beginning; they're doing it as it goes along.
When they're done.
When they're done.
They're
Okay.
making sure
so
the colors are
post-production.
consistent.
Okay.